Hey everybody, my name is Victoria. Welcome back to my channel, and today I am doing my next batch of recent reads. So on my channel, I talk about my wrap-ups not monthly, but by tens. So every time I finish 10 books, I will do a wrap-up, and I've found that that is just a little bit better for me rather than monthly, because lately I've only been reading like 3 books per month or so. So I figured it would be better to just put them all together in a bigger bunch for you rather than doing just 3-book wrap-ups all the time. And so this is actually the next 11 books that I have read. And so we're just going to dive right into it. I'm going to be starting with my DNFs and least favorite reads, and then I'm going to be going into my very favorite reads. So amongst these 11 books, I have 1 DNF, 1 2-star read, 3 3-star reads, 4 4-star reads, and 2 5-star reads. My genre breakdown is 1 contemporary, 1 horror/thriller, 1 classic, 1 YA fantasy, 4 adult sci-fi fantasy novels, and 3 nonfiction. Okay, let's start with the book that I DNF'd. I did have 1 that I DNF'd. I didn't get that far through it. I probably got only about 15-20% through before I just decided, you know what, not enjoying this. And that was The Garden of Small Beginnings by Abbi Waxman. This was actually Krista from Books and Jams. She has a Patreon book club, and I recently joined it, and this was going to be a read for that book club. And so I tried it out with them, and right away this just wasn't for me. And I saw that Krista didn't really love this one either, so looks like this just didn't click with us. I was really sad about this one because I've actually read a book by Abbi Waxman before. I have read The Bookish Life of Nina Hill, and I really loved that one. I think I even gave it like 4 or 5 stars at the time, and so I was excited to try another Abbi Waxman book, and this one is a bit of an older book by her, and this one just totally missed the mark. I do struggle with contemporaries often. It's rare for me to find a contemporary that I really love, and so this unfortunately fell in that category for me of contemporaries that I just don't click with. This book follows a lady who has actually lost her husband, and she is sort of trying to find her place in life again and trying to kind of come out of it and figuring out how to go forward. And so it sounded like a fine premise, but what turned me off from the book like right away was there's quite a bit of like a hookup culture with like the friends and like her sister that surrounds her, and everybody is just like talking about sex all the time, and they're just like, you need to get laid, you need to get laid. And I'm just like, I don't like those kinds of books. It just felt like the female characters were very shallow, and that was like all they cared about was getting laid. I also found the female characters to just be kind of whiny, unfortunately. I just didn't like the tone of the book. It had a kind of like a negative tone to me, even though it was trying to be funny, but like often in a very crass way. And that's just not the type of humor that I click with. It basically just embodied a lot of things about the chick lit genre that I don't like, and it's not that I don't like that genre, but there's definitely some tropes in there that I don't enjoy. So this was just full of that, and so I decided to abandon ship, and maybe I'll try another Abbi Waxman book that maybe has a different premise. I don't know. I'll have to see. I am curious to try her again because I did love one of her books. So I feel like this is not the last shot for me with this author. I would probably try her again. The next book that I have to talk about is Nightmare by Chad Nicholas. And I actually received an ebook copy from the author. So thank you so much, Chad Nicholas, for letting me read your book and reaching out to me. I really appreciate it, and I did enjoy a lot of this book. However, I did end up giving it 2 stars, unfortunately. First of all, I see like immense potential with this author. I think he's super talented. I was enjoying a lot of this book, like most of this book. What really just kind of brought it down for me a lot was the ending. I totally disagreed with the ending and how it all wrapped up. I really wanted it to go in a different direction. So maybe that's not completely fair for me to not like a book as much just because I don't like the ending. But I don't know. The ending just really, I didn't get it. I didn't understand how it all wrapped up. And I just didn't think it worked. And it also just felt really rushed at the end. But I really was enjoying most of this book. This is a horror thriller novel about a man who is being plagued by these terrible dreams and nightmares, specifically involving crows. As you read the book, you find out more about why he's having these dreams and what happened to him. And he has some consequences for his life, some things that have happened as a result of some like childhood trauma. And so the book is unfolding what's kind of going on in his inner psyche. And so I thought this was really well done for a lot of the book. I really read this super fast. I actually read it in like 2 sittings, and I read most of this book in a really long car ride because I went up to see Christy Lewis. I visited her for a few days, and so on my drive back home, I pretty much just read this entire book. And it had me on the edge of my seat. He really knows how to write just really intense horror scenes, and also he really just knows how to put imagery in your brain. I felt like his imagery was great. He was just really good at painting pictures. And again, I loved so much of this book. It's just the ending I didn't like. So I'm giving it 2, maybe 3 stars. I definitely would follow this author, and I do want to read more that he puts out. It's just this one I felt was a little bit clunky in the way it wrapped up. There's also, I will say, some writing inconsistencies that I just felt were a bit obvious, and I just felt like it really needed some more maybe tweaking and editing, and just being consistent with the characters and their reactions and how someone might realistically react to things. Sometimes I felt like the characters didn't react in a realistic way to what was happening to them. So, yeah, but I do think that Chad Nicholas has so much potential as an author to really knock it out of the park, and I would say this one almost knocked it out of the park for me, and I will be following more of what he puts out. Moving on to my 3-star books, the first book I want to talk about is Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo. I recently watched the first season of Shadow and Bone that was released, totally loved it, had so much fun with it. And so I realized that I have never finished the trilogy, and so I continued on. I had read the first book, but just hadn't continued yet. So I finally got the second book under my belt, and this was lots of fun. I will say I think I liked the first book in Shadow and Bone better. This one just continued some of the tropes that and really banged you over the head with them. I felt like, specifically more love triangles, when I really feel like there didn't need to be a love triangle again, but then there was. And so I didn't want to see that again, and we definitely had that in this book. But I would say it was a really fun read still. It's just very compulsively readable. I was reading this as kind of like a brain break, if you will. I had been reading some heavier stuff, and so this was honestly just what I needed at the time. And I still think this is super fun. We continue to follow Alina Starkov after the events of the first book, so I won't talk too much about it because I don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, this was fun. I will be reading the third book very soon, hopefully soon, and would love to see how this trilogy is going to conclude. But yeah, this is just fun. The next 3-star book for me was Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, which surprised me actually. I have read this before. This was actually a reread, but I wanted to read it again with the Codex Cantina and Leslie and Christy. They all did a read-along. The first time I read it, I gave it 5 stars. And then the second time, I gave it 3 stars. So maybe I was in a mood or something when I was reading it. But I did just read it more critically this time around, and I think what brought it down for me was just, I don't agree with kind of the worldview that Vonnegut has, and it's just very pessimistic and sad. And I felt like there was very little hope in this book. It was just a lot more pessimistic. And I think the first time I just was like really entranced by the writing, and it was just, it is such a different novel, and I really respect it for that. It's so different in its construction. It's almost like not even classified as a novel because it really doesn't follow a novel structure. So this follows a character who has survived through World War II, and some weird stuff happens to him. There are aliens involved. There is some sci-fi elements in it as well, but it's really about characters surviving World War II and surviving specifically the bombing of Dresden, which was an event that I didn't know a lot about until I read this book. So I definitely appreciate this book for teaching me about that event in history. And something else I didn't know the first time around was that Vonnegut himself actually survived the bombing of Dresden, and this novel is a result of him kind of processing through his own experiences with that as well. So that all was so interesting. I am glad I have so much more background knowledge now. I'm really glad I read along with everyone. It's just, I do find this book incredibly pessimistic, and it's okay that it's pessimistic, really, because it is about really heavy topics, and it's about like PTSD. It is about war, and it's an anti-war book, and so it makes sense that it is pessimistic. But just personally for me, I wish there was more of like a hopeful, positive streak. I don't know. Again, it's just what I like to see in books, and this is just a very different book. So I still think it's worth reading. I would even probably read it again. I'm giving it 3 stars for now. But yeah, this is a good classic though. I definitely want to read more Kurt Vonnegut. I haven't read any other works by him, so I really need to. The next 3-star book I have here is That Hideous Strength by C.S. Lewis. This was part of a read-along that I was hosting. We did a read-along of the Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis. This is actually the 3rd book in the trilogy, and I do have all my live streams linked down below. So if you want to check out our live stream discussions, full spoiler talks, those will be linked down in the description below. We had a great time reading through these books, but this one is my least favorite in the trilogy, and it is the 3rd one in the trilogy. So unfortunately, the trilogy doesn't end with a bang for me. It ended with a bit of a whimper. And so I just didn't like how we really were like taken out of the fantastic elements. This is a lot more like realistic and gritty in some ways. It's more dystopian, which like dystopian is not my favorite genre in general. So this is definitely more on the dystopian side of sci-fi fantasy, which was interesting. I did think the world was interesting, but I was really missing more of like the fantastical elements that we got in the first 2 books. So that was just a personal preference. I also know other people who actually this is their favorite book, and even like favorite book of all time. And so if you just like that more realistic setting, you'll like this book. It has a lot to do with C.S. Lewis's ideas that he talks about in Abolition of Man. It has a lot to do with just man excelling beyond what he should excel to, and a big theme in this book is just man being the downfall of himself, basically, because he's too ambitious and starts to like try to change nature. And so C.S. Lewis himself was very concerned about like the direction of science and man's power, and the whole theme of this book is really power and man trying to take power away from God. So if you enjoy deep philosophical conversations about things like that, you would love this one. This one, just for me, I felt like the story was all over the place. It was a little bit discombobulating. So this one was my least favorite one. Now getting into my 4-star books. One of them was John Ploughman's Talk, which I do not know where my copy is. I definitely have a physical copy of it somewhere, but it has just disappeared for some reason. So I did read John Ploughman's Talk. This was a read-along with Christy again, and also with Carla from the channel Raised to Walk, and also Alan from the Library of Alexandria. This is Christian nonfiction by Spurgeon, and Spurgeon was actually a Victorian minister, and he is very famous now. He has like many very famous writings, and this is one of them. This is more a bunch of like separate parables, not parables, but like lessons, like life lessons. And it's all about just like being a decently good person, really. And it's all about just following God in your daily life. And so it's very in the style of like vignettes. And each chapter is kind of a different topic. And John Ploughman is like Spurgeon's idea of kind of like the man who just works diligently. He's a farmer. He works the land, and he follows God with all his heart, and he lives like an upright life. And so it's really just all about how to live a godly life and to just fulfill your calling in life. So this was really great. I hadn't read some Spurgeon in a long time, so it was awesome. Spurgeon is awesome. Check him out. We also had a live stream discussion for that on, I think, Christy's channel. If I can find it, I will link it down below for you if you're interested. The next 4-star book for me was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is his latest book. If you don't know who Andy Weir is, he wrote The Martian. A lot of people are familiar with The Martian because there was also a film. And so this was his latest sci-fi novel. I actually have not read any of his previous books, but I have watched The Martian movie. And so this is my first experience actually with his writing, and I really liked it. I will say this is very heavy on the science side, like a lot of nitty-gritty details about like cellular biology and space travel and like astrophysics. So a lot of that stuff went over my head quite a bit. It was really interesting. It's just, I felt like it was a bit info dumpy for the reader if you're not like really into that, which I'm not super into science. So for me, I was just like, wow, I feel like I'm reading a science textbook sometimes. And so that was a little bit difficult. But I will say the story of this is like top notch. I loved the story. The premise is we are introduced to our main character who wakes up on a spaceship, and he is completely alone, and he sees that at one point he had two people with him, but when he wakes up, they are both dead, and he is the only one who has survived this mission, and he has amnesia. He can't remember why he's on this mission, where his spaceship is going, and so he has to figure all that out by himself. So very similar premise kind of to The Martian, like lone man in space. And so I know some people were criticizing it for that. I didn't really mind. I thought it was different enough. Actually, the story goes in a very different place than The Martian. So I loved it. The next 4-star book I read was Perelandra by C.S. Lewis. This is the second book in the Space Trilogy. And this one was a 4-star one for me. I will say I loved being on the specific planet that we're on. We spend a lot of time on Venus. I don't feel like that's a spoiler. I feel like I could say that. We spend a lot of time on the planet Venus, and C.S. Lewis's descriptions of like what he thinks the planet Venus is like are just so gorgeous. C.S. Lewis just really shines in his descriptive writing in these books, and that's really my favorite part about them. We follow our main character Ransom and his adventures going forward. I won't say too much because this is the second book, but this does follow our main character Ransom. I did feel like this one got really heavy on the theology aspects, and again, I felt a bit info dumped on, especially towards the end. I feel like you could just study the end as like a dissertation and it's just really intense at the end. But I did just really love this for the descriptive writing and the story again. So 4 stars for this one. And the last 4-star book on my list here is The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis. I just read a lot of C.S. Lewis lately, obviously. This is like a C.S. Lewis wrap-up, basically. But this is one of his nonfiction works where he is just arguing a point. It's very short. I was listening to it on audio, actually, and I listened to it in like 2 or 3 hours, I would say. I probably missed a lot, though. So this is one I wouldn't recommend on audio. Definitely read it physically if you want to get more out of it. But I just wanted to pair this with that Hideous Strength because Summer from Summer's Moving Bookshelf let us know that this book basically carries the themes that are in that Hideous Strength. So if you're curious of kind of what the themes are in that third book in the trilogy, Abolition of Man will basically tell you what those themes are. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. So much to chew on. Again, heavily theological, so if that's not your thing, you probably won't like this. But if it is your thing, it's fascinating. Very, very interesting. I wouldn't necessarily start with this one if you're just now getting into C.S. Lewis. I wouldn't have this as like your first foray into it. But that does bring me into my 5-star reads. I think this is a great place to start with C.S. Lewis, and that is Mere Christianity. And this is a reread for me. I think this is probably my 4th time rereading this book. This is actually probably my all-time favorite nonfiction book. Yeah, I think I could safely say that. But Krista from Books and Jams did a read-along of this with a bunch of other booktubers that she invited to discuss it with her. And I just really enjoyed chatting with them in their live streams. And there's just so much great stuff to talk about with this. So this is kind of like C.S. Lewis's like Christianity 101. And if you don't know much about Christianity, this is actually a book that I would put into your hands just on any other day. And I have put it into people's hands before. He's just so good at breaking down like what Christianity is and just making it really like accessible, especially like if you don't know a lot about it. He's just so good at making the information like real. And actually these were originally a bunch of radio talks, and so it does have a very like conversational way of speaking with this book, which I think also makes it feel very accessible as well. I also just love that he's not judgmental in this. Like he's very like warm and unassuming and really like anti-judgmental. And so yeah, this is just wonderful. It's just such a good book. 5 stars always. And then my last 5-star book that I want to talk about was Out of the Silent Planet. I loved the first book in the Space Trilogy. This just is so full of wonder, and I just loved getting to know our characters and seeing the world. I think the world building is really what shines in this first book, and you just feel just so swept away in everything. And again, his descriptions of what he thinks another planet would be like is just amazing. We spend time on Mars in this book, so we meet different like people groups as well that are living on Mars, and I just love like how unique each one of them is. And yeah, I would say character development as far as like with the humans in this is not like super strong. I do think most of our like human characters are kind of flat, and they're kind of like I don't want to say like cardboard cutouts of ideas, but they kind of are. There's not a lot of character development in this book, so it's definitely more about the world building and just like the sense of wonder that we get by traveling to this other planet with our main character Ransom. So I still just like, I loved it. I loved every minute of it. So 5 stars. Those are the books that I have read recently. Let me know down below if you've read any of these, if you have any thoughts on them, disagree or agree with me. And also, what is your favorite book that you have read in the last few months? Be sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already so that you can keep up with my bookish adventures. And I will also have links to everybody I mentioned in this video and also to our live stream discussions that I referenced. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Keep reading great books, and until next time, bye-bye.